So I'll now take 6 or 7 minutes to introduce myself and why I'm running for this office in particular, and then we'll be happy to get any questions or comments. My name's Bryan Hambley. I'm a leukemia doctor in Cincinnati. I grew up on a small farm in southern Indiana, and I'm running for Secretary of State because I think fair elections and honest elections are critical to building a democracy which solves problems. My wife, Jana, and I have had a recurring conversation the last 10 years. And it's been about what comes next in American democracy. My wife comes from a small town too. There have been a lot of issues left behind by our government over the last 10 years, whether it's tax policy that favors the wealthy, whether it's an economy that's leaving almost everybody behind, whether it's public schools that are falling apart. We haven't had effective government or representatives that are dealing with problems in their communities. Now, I'm reminded in my day job as a physician that everybody cares about the health of themselves and their communities and their families. A couple of years ago, I had a leukemia patient, far southern Ohio, young single mother, presents her local emergency room, small critical access hospital with a nosebleed, only to be told she has leukemia. And she was sent by ambulance, sirens blaring, 2 hours to Cincinnati. First time in her life she'd ever been to Cincinnati. And when I walked into her room at the large hospital in Cincinnati where I work, this woman was scared. But she wasn't just scared of the leukemia. She was scared that her new high deductible plan, she had a non-union job, had a high deductible health care plan, and she wasn't going to be able to afford Christmas presents for the kids that year because she was worried that the copays would be too much. She was scared that insurance was going to decline all the chemotherapy she needed for her leukemia. And she was scared that she'd have to travel 2 hours away from her family and support network to get any care because all the hospitals and local clinics have been consolidated or shut down in her part of Ohio. And that's been happening across the state. And when she was describing these fears, what I was thinking was she's not describing Democratic fears or Republican fears. She's describing human fears. And when I think of what our legislature has done to allay these kind of fears, to make a more secure future for her and many Ohioans like her, it is nothing in the last decade. Now, you might be wondering, what in the world does the Secretary of State do that could help build a more secure future for her and address the many issues we have in Ohio right now? And so I'll start by saying what the Secretary of State is supposed to do by the Ohio Constitution. 1, the Secretary of State is supposed to draw fair districts for state representative, for Congress. Secretary of State is supposed to write honest ballot language when you go to vote on a constitutional amendment. The Secretary of State is supposed to make it easy and fair to vote and make sure those votes are counted accurately. Those are the 3 key responsibilities of the Secretary of State. There's other business jobs that they do, but those are fairly straightforward. Did anyone sign the petition against gerrymandering last year? Oh, wow, great.
I spoke.
Oh, great. So I don't have to tell most of you in this room that we have a Secretary of State in Ohio who for the last 6 years has doubled down on gerrymandering, disenfranchising millions of Ohioans, Republicans and Democrats alike. We have a Secretary of State who has now twice written dishonest ballot language, putting his thumb on the scale so that he could get his way rather than just let Ohio voters get their way. And we've got a Secretary of State who makes it a little harder to vote every chance he gets, especially for people who he suspects might not vote for him. So that's what we've got. If talking about any office a year and a half out from an election is about anything, it's about imagining something better. And so one of the reasons I wanted to get ideas and thoughts and information about Shelby from you all is I've never been here before. But if we don't start imagining a better future, if we don't start identifying problems right now, nothing's going to happen in 27. Nothing's going to happen in 31. Doesn't matter who the governor is. We need to imagine an Ohio democracy that works better too. We need to imagine an Ohio democracy where if you go in to vote on a constitutional amendment, you can actually understand in plain English what you're voting on. And then the amendment sinks or swims on its own popularity with Ohio voters. This is not a Democratic idea or a Republican idea. This is just a common sense idea for people who are going to vote and want to understand what they're voting on. We need to imagine Ohio where the districts are drawn by an independent commission like it is in many states, and this works. This is not pie in the sky, an independent commission, rather than let politicians draw their own districts. And we need to imagine Ohio where it is easy to vote for every Ohio citizen, and those votes are counted fairly. Now, I believe that government is where we should do together what none of us can do alone. Build safe schools, good roads, and a healthcare system that, in my view, ought to be universal, simple, and affordable. Now, I get that this is hard for a Democrat in Ohio. I've been in hard fights before. You know, when I went to the University of Cincinnati to take over the leukemia program, the University of Cincinnati is a safety net hospital in Cincinnati, much like Metro is in Cleveland. And we care for everybody. We were the worst leukemia program in the entire country. And a Chicago consulting firm had recommended shutting it down. And we knew the wealthier patients would be just fine. They'd go to Cleveland or they'd go to Chicago or Columbus and they'd get care. But we knew if we shut it down, we'd be leaving a lot of people behind in rural Southern Ohio, Eastern Kentucky, and inner city Cincinnati, people who relied on that hospital providing good care. And so we gathered a team of nurses, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, physicians, who were committed to an idea that we needed to have a great blood cancer program in Cincinnati. 5 years on, after I joined, we are now one of the best leukemia programs in the country. And we just opened a new leukemia building. Now, that I've gotten a lot of credit for that, but really it's the whole team. It's the nurses who didn't leave for another hospital when it got really hard. The pharmacists who make sure every patient gets the right medicine and the right chemotherapy for their cancer. And when I think of how to translate my experience as a physician to running for Secretary of State, especially as a Democrat in Ohio, there are 3 lessons that I want to take away from it. One is, in any long shot effort, you need a team. No one person's going to do it. In any long shot effort, you need passion and persistence and work ethic out the wazoo. And in any long shot effort, you need long-term ideals so you know what you're fighting for even when it gets really hard. Those are the lessons I want to take from my job in running for Secretary of State. I know that when my leukemia patients are advocating for a healthcare system that works better for them, the number one thing that hampers them is a broken and gerrymandered democracy in Ohio where politicians don't feel beholden to the citizens they represent. It's the number one problem. Yeah. Now, I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old and a wife who's a trauma surgeon in Cincinnati. Being away from them is hard, but I am passionate about doing this work, about being out early, about visiting every community in the state. I want to leave, Josephine and Luke with a democracy where they can use their imaginations to solve the great problems of their time, and that they believe in democracy as a means to do it. And so I really appreciate, John, the invitation to be here today. I'd love to get your questions, and I wanted to really emphasize that I am here and I am committed to a passionate and positive campaign and dedicated to trying to build a type of government in Ohio where we do together what none of us can do alone. So thank you very much. I'd love any questions or comments.